Meeting to order. Mr. Coley, could you note that all the commissioners are present?
Yes.
The minutes have been sent out. If there's not any corrections, can I have have a move and second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're going to move to official action, Resolution 1351, amending the rate schedule of the gas division, providing for a rate schedule of compressed natural gas vehicle fuel. Second and final reading. Recognize Minta.
I couldn't find John. John Williams is our Assistant CFO. He presented this report to you last month. You passed it on first reading, and he is recognized to consider it for second reading.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Last month, we did present for your consideration Resolution 1351 for the CNG vehicle fuel rate. And with that, the board approved that on first reading. And that rate component, if you remember, has a base rate that includes the capital and O&M cost recovery as well as the cost of natural gas. And of course, we also collect state and federal taxes and then the transaction fees that are associated with that. The resolution also includes a schedule with discounted pricing tiered for should a commercial fleet user wish to enter into an agreement for longer term, higher volume sales of CNG. And with that, today we ask for your consideration of second and final reading of Resolution 1351 to adopt the CNG vehicle fueling rate. That rate will be calculated monthly, available by the 5th business day of the month. And of course, if approved, will be effective January 1st, 2017, just in time for the opening of our public CNG station in January. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? If not, could I request a motion and a second to Resolution 1351 on second and final reading?
Move it to adopt Resolution 1351.
Second.
Is there anyone here to speak on that from the public? If not, Mr. Coley, could you please call roll for Resolution 1351?
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Askew.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Pinnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Thompson.
Aye.
Commissioner Warden.
Aye.
Resolution 1351 is passed on second reading.
For many of you all that don't know why we laughed, he's always last, so he wasn't realizing he was going to be called first to give his
He gets me first today.
Gets to go ahead of the class.
Always that. That's it.
Okay, we're going on to the president report. I will recognize Minta.
Commissioners, let me remind you that in September you had a board presentation on our Century 2 plan looking back in history. In October you had another presentation looking forward for the next 10 years. We've also during the period of time since our last meeting, had the opportunity to talk to most of you about your inputs, about where we should be headed with our Century 2 program and our other financial matters. So I'll recognize Mark Walker to recap that discussion and talk to you about the future. I will remind you, though, that we will not have any official action on this agenda with regard to this matter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My presentation today will be brief. I'm going to provide you with a summary of, I can see. I'm very, very happy. I just added 5 minutes. But I'm going to give you a summary of the 10-year plans, including our planned level of system investment for each of the 4 utility systems, and also talk about the proposed funding for each of the systems, and I'll do that fairly quickly. No surprises today. It is a reflection of what we discussed at the September and October meetings, and also includes feedback that we received from the board during our individual discussions. I wanted to start out, however, by just taking a few moments and mention some key points that we believe reflect the consensus position of the board and staff on Century 2 and how to fund it. Sort of think of these as maybe guiding principles for our 10-year plan. But first and foremost, the continuation of Century 2. Century 2 should continue. We believe, simply put, that is in the best interest of KUB's customers. In order to achieve our vision of providing safe and reliable service for both current and future generations of KUB customers, we need to consistently invest in our system infrastructure. And we've been doing it for a few years now, and we think we've received positive results. For example, electric reliability this past year, all-time record high for electric reliability. We've also noted an 82% reduction in sanitary sewer overflows on the wastewater system. So those are just a couple of prime examples, I think, of results that we're seeing from the investments we're making in the system and your commitment to funding those investments. The next point, we've had a lot of conversations about the importance of investing in a series of projects to provide redundant water treatment facilities. That's essentially, as you know, we have a single water treatment plant. And for a water system of our size, that's a bit of an anomaly. We assessed the situation, looked at the potential of building or constructing another plant, but we've settled on a series of projects to build, construct in close proximity to our existing plant. And the board and our feedback we've received is that those are very critical and need to be included in the water 10-year plan. As far as funding Century 2, we've had a balanced funding approach for years. We're going to continue with that balanced funding approach using an appropriate combination or an appropriate mix of debt, rates, and cost savings to help fund the programs. And as you know, we're going to be asking our customers to pay a little bit more each year to help fund the programs. Therefore, it is imperative that we as a staff and we as employees at KUB continue to look for ways to be efficient in our management of the systems, to be cost effective in our Century 2 investments. We owe that to our customers. In particular, we're going to ask them to pay a little bit more. For the wastewater system, for debt and rates, after the consent decree, which we can see coming in 2021, we need to look to slow and actually reduce the level of outstanding debt for the wastewater division and slow the growth of rate increases, which we think we'll be able to do. I think everybody in this room will recognize the significant level of investment that's taken to fulfill the requirements of the consent decree for the collection system and for the treatment plants, and the impact that it's had on our wastewater customers. So, once with the completion of the CD, our capital requirements will lessen somewhat. We should be able to slowly reduce the level of debt and also slow the growth of rate increases. Customer growth. We've heard several times from the board the importance of adding new customers to our systems. And why is that? Well, they provide a long-term source of revenue. And the more customers that we can add over time, the less the impact of debt and rates on our customers to help fund our Century 2 programs. So it's important. And you'll recall from our discussions that the assumptions we have in our 10-year plans for all 4 systems reflects relatively modest growth for the next 10 years, and that's based upon recent historical experience. And I think that's appropriate. But at the same time, we need to continue to look for ways to support our development community, both residential and commercial development. We need to continue to foster our relationship with the Chamber and other economic development agencies and be an active partner in looking to help retain businesses and bring new businesses to the Knoxville area, especially those businesses that use a lot of utilities in particular. So that's very important. And we also need to look for other ways, maybe non-traditional ways to incent customers to connect to the system. So the importance of that. And then really these last 2 points go together, but I can't understate or overstate, I guess, the importance of flexibility in our planning process. We don't want to box ourselves in. Business conditions will change over the next 10 years. They'll change over the next year. They've changed in the last several weeks. You noticed that the Fed raised interest rates yesterday. We'd already seen upward pressure in rates in the last few weeks. You know, we sold bonds back in July, 30-year bonds at 2.75%. Today, those bonds would be sold about 3.8%. So it's already moved about 100 basis points. Well, we have to factor that into our plans, and that's going to put some pressure on that. Another example of changing conditions is you're aware that the city, through grant funding, continues to do streetscape projects. Well, we participate in that as well, as that we often have to relocate our utilities. And when we relocate them, we typically upgrade them if needed. Well, there can be costs of sometimes millions of dollars associated, especially if it's a long streetscape project. And again, that's something we hadn't planned on. Unanticipated expenses have to be factored in as well, and we sort of have to rebalance the plan. But again, the importance of flexibility, and that's why, in that last bullet, we would recommend that the board adopt no more than 3 rate increases in the spring. We think for the next 3 years, we have balance, we can control, and the rate increases we're recommending is appropriate. But beyond that, conditions change and we may have to rebalance the outer years of the plan. So, just sort of in conclusion, some of the key points I think that do reflect the consensus of the board and staff as we move forward. And now to spend just a few minutes on each of the 4 systems, and I'll go quickly because I know you've seen this information several times, but the 10-year plan for the electric system, as far as investments, $750 million. Investments focused on the safety and reliability of the system. For the electric system, we'll continue our Century 2 programs with respect to replacement of poles, upgrade of substations, replacement upgrading of overhead lines, and other key assets. We also have $70 million in that $750 million for our grid modernization initiative, which primarily is the replacement of 200,000 electric meters, upgrading those with advanced meters, which will have a lot of benefits for our customers, and also a lot of distribution automation projects as part of that as well. So how will we fund that? We're looking at the next 10 years, the $750 million would be funded by a combination of 62% revenue, 38% debt. That's $288 million in new bonds for the electric system. This is where we started this fiscal year. You can see we'll have repayments of debt over that period of time, but we would end with about $369 million in outstanding debt. The debt ratio will move up a little bit above the target and then come down to 41% by the end of the plan. So about a 60-40 split on funding the capital program. As far as rate increases, what we will recommend to the board in the spring in terms of rate increases for the residential customers is a $1.50 increase in the residential monthly bill for each of the next 3 years. And then you'll see this in all of the systems. We would anticipate, if conditions hold, that we would be able to have lower increases in the outer years of the plan. And then as far as having a balanced plan, we need to maintain an appropriate level of debt service coverage, and we are expected to do that. And that's the electric system. On the gas system, $242 million in total investments. Relatively newer system, so it's about a third the level of the electric system capital program. The main KUB, or the main component of the gas capital program, is the replacement of critical main. We've talked a lot about getting cast iron and ductile iron main out of our system. That should be completed once the Alcoa Highway Road project is completed here in the next year or so. And then low pressure steel main. We have 100 miles to remove in our 10-year plan. Keeps us on track to have all of that out by 2035. As far as the funding for the gas plan, a little bit different than electric, about 27% debt, 73% revenue over the next 10 years. And you can see the outstanding level of debt for gas from where we started this 10 years and where we end virtually unchanged. So the amount of debt that we'll issue, the new bonds, will basically be repaying the same amount. So the outstanding level really doesn't change. But the debt ratio will drop to below 30%. The bill increases, as far as the recommended rate increases, residential impacts 75-cent increase on the monthly bill each of the next 3 years. And then we would anticipate it could drop to 50 cents and then 25 cents. On the water system, $354 million program. The key components of this is to continue with our 1% annual replacement of water pipe. That's what we anticipate right now. That's about 15 miles per year on average. And you can see we have about $90 million in the plan to do that. The other big critical spending area is to invest in the water plant redundancy that we talked about a few minutes ago. There's $120 million in the 10-year plan for that. And that is a series of projects that really spans the length of the 10 years, which ranges from new pumps and new filters, a new high-service pump station, to probably the most costly component is a new intake point upstream of the plant where we could draw water if needed from the Holston and French Broad rivers. As far as funding the water plant, $354 million. little bit more debt than the other systems here, 57%, 43% revenue. So the outstanding debt level will actually increase about 123 million on a net basis. And the debt ratio will go a little bit above our target level and then come back down below it by 2026. And the rate increases for the water system from a residential bill perspective, a $2 increase in the monthly bill for each of the next 3 years, and then to $1.50, and then to $1. It's a little bit higher on the front end as we begin the funding for the plant redundancy investments. And then to conclude with wastewater, $466 million capital plan. We will continue with our rate of replacement of wastewater pipe at 2% per year. We've really committed to the regulatory authorities that we will continue at that pace even after the consent decree is completed. And you can see in the next 10 years, $264 million for 220 miles of main. So the next 10 years, it's about 22 miles per year. The long-term average actually works out to be about 25 miles per year. The other big news on the wastewater system is that the consent decree. We are anticipating that all projects will be completed to fulfill our requirements of the CD by 2021. And then after that, the capital requirements will lessen somewhat, and we should be able to slow the growth of debt and rates, as demonstrated by the planned funding summary for the wastewater system. And you can see currently, or as we began this past fiscal year, we had a debt funding of 65% for the wastewater system. But over the next 10 years, for that $466 million, 48% debt funding. So as you would expect, that debt ratio will drop slowly over time, projected to end the plan around 56%. But also of note, and this is a good thing, even though it's a modest reduction, over the last 5 years of the plan, we'll actually see the outstanding level of debt decline. Which again, it's only $13 million out of 573 to 560, but it's a step in the right direction, and we certainly would anticipate that continuing afterwards beyond 2026. For the rate increases for the residential bill, $3 increase in the monthly bill for each of the next 3 years is what we're going to recommend. That is consistent with the past 3 years, but then again, with the consent decree completing, we will look and work towards that getting lower and lower over time. And that's the wastewater system. So I'll conclude by saying, echoing Ms. Roach's comments, we certainly appreciate the board's time and your attention and your input as we've worked through this planning process dating back to September. We're going to take a bit of a break, and we'll go off and work on our plans and look at all the system investments, but we'll be back in April to have our annual budget financial workshop. And at that time, we'll review the rate increases, recommendations in more detail. But we'll also probably spend the largest share of that workshop talking about the systems, the types of system investments, going into greater detail. And to the extent that any business condition changes that we've talked about or others cause us to shift any priorities, we'll certainly share that and talk to the board about that. So that's April, and then in May and June, we'll actually get into the official action items as far as adopting the budget for fiscal year 2018, approving the rate increases on first reading, any debt or bonds to be sold for 2018, which there will be. We'll bring those for your consideration. And then last but not least, resolutions, new resolutions that reflect the board's commitment to Century 2 will be presented for your consideration also. And I did that in about 15 minutes, so I held to my word. Do y'all have any questions?
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, I want to tell you this is a very special day at KUB. As you can tell from the audience, that we don't have a lot of visitors here that are from the public. They're actually from our KUB family. So I'll recognize Susan Edwards, who will tell you why today's so special to us.
It is a great day. We always like December because we have lots of visitors, and for a very good reason this year with our Employee Excellence Awards. Before we get to that, though, I did want to say just a few words about some work that many of our other employees who may not be in the room today have been able to help with the situation in Sevier County. As you all know, they had quite a disaster up there, and pretty much as soon as the smoke cleared, I think we got a call from Sevier County Electric System asking if we could send some crews to help repair the damage to their system, which was considerable. We were very happy to be able to honor that request. We actually had folks in our overhead department asking could they go and help, and we ended up sending 2 crews up there for 6 days. That's 10 line workers at a time, 8 pieces of equipment, and they worked side by side with the Sevier County folks to do a lot of work in a short period of time. They worked 16-hour shifts just as if they were working a storm on our system. So midweek, we swapped out those 2 crews for 2 others. In the end, we had 20 different employees who worked out there during that event. So I know they appreciated it. We appreciated their commitment as well. Yesterday and today, we have about 139 employees who are volunteering at the warehouse in Sevier County. As you all know, we have a volunteer time program that allows people to spend time volunteering at local agencies. This is a little bit out of our service area, but because of the nature of this disaster, we did make an exception, and we had a great response to that. Our volunteer time program this year has been really successful. We've had about 400 employees take part. That's 3,000 hours of volunteer time committed to 25 different local agencies. So we're really pleased and grateful for that way in which our employees are living out the blueprint and being active participants in the communities that we serve. But the other thing we're here to celebrate today is these employees and many more who couldn't fit in the room with our Employee Excellence Awards. As you know, this is a program we started a few years ago at the suggestion of our former chair, Bruce Anderson, and we are so glad that we did, because it gives us the chance once a year to really look at all the best and brightest of the efforts that our employees have made throughout the year and really recognize the ways in which they're doing a great job serving our customers. The awards you're going to hear about today really fall into 3 different categories. We're going to honor some folks for their commitment to customer service and some specific ways in which they've done that. We have some awards for innovation, because again, that's another way we can improve the value of our services to our customers by innovating the way we do it. And thirdly is cost savings. You just heard from Mark how important that is to our financial plan, so we want to recognize those achievements as well. So we've got some really great presentations for you all to hear today. This motley crew over here is who's going to give those for you all. We have invited the folks who are either managers or team leaders over these employees over here to help share their stories. And so you're going to hear from Kendall Stiles, who is our manager of customer support and key accounts. You'll hear from Jamie Davis, our manager of underground construction. Gabriel Bolas, who is our new senior vice president of engineering. Brooke Sinclair, who is our manager of safety, technical services, and security. Bob Colwick, who is an engineer in our system operations area. Mark Kenner, who is our manager of IT and business performance. Billy Joe McCarley, who is our plants manager. And Derwin Hagan, who is our new senior vice president over operations. So they're all going to help tell the stories of their employees, and I don't have to invite you all up here. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kendall. And I'll also call your attention to the fact that you have lots of details about all the folks you're about to hear about in this handout, which is in your folder. So when you have a minute, take the time and look at it.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Nothing more pressure packed than having to call out a list of names.
Susan gets the first award.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce you to Tim Cox, who's the recipient of the Customer Service Excellence Award. Tim began his career at KUB in January of 1996 as a construction tech in underground construction, where he learned a lot of hands-on, gained a lot of hands-on experience in the construction side of the business. And then in 2012, he came to customer support and began his role as a customer service advisor, where he took his construction knowledge